Friends and colleagues, I really feel privileged and honored to be here, coming all the way from Nairobi, and talking about this topic, which has been discussed, I think, since Tuesday. We have been talking about, in different contexts, the use of economic values in different contexts, in the context of BES, in the context of accounting, and in the larger context of mainstreaming. So what I'm going to do, I will basically, there are three components of my talk. First, I would like to give the context of economic values where it is really needed and used. Second, what are the complexities? Some of them have been mentioned by earlier speakers. And since this conference is focusing on solution, so 1/3 of my talk would be what could be the possible ways to handle the issues of economic valuation, because the moment you mention value, there is lots of fire and smokes, and one of the slides from Steve mentioned about that, because valuation is a debatable topic. So that is the scheme of my talk. Valuation, and again, I will take more the policy-centric approach. There are many things happening in research and academia. I would mention about that, but I would be more on the track of the use of economic values in practice by the policymakers at national and regional level. So valuation in the context of ecosystem management was prominently focused in the response working group of Millennium Ecosystem Assessment. And experts and scientists, they felt that economic valuation can be used more effectively to have efficient management of ecosystems. That was 2005. Even last month in Rio, where 400 ministers, 60 head of states came. And if you see the document, whether it is paragraph 38 or 75, no point in counting the paragraphs, they are giving the flavor that economic values will be helpful in the context of accounting, that is 38th paragraph, or in the context of inclusive green economy, which is the major focus, which was the major focus of U+20, the economic valuation will be helpful. So that is coming from the head of states and ministers who, and also a large number of civil society, they also felt that economic valuation will be helpful. But this was not something coming out of blue. There has been a history. If you take CBD of 1992, where 12 principles of ecosystem management were adopted, they talked about valuation. MA, I have mentioned, Millennium Assessment, they talked about valuation. Another report which came in the fall of 2006, and I'm 100% sure everybody in this hall knows about this report. This was not dealing with ecosystem as such. Carbon was the issue. This report was written for UK Treasury by Lord Nick Stern, and the way it organized information in terms of cost of action versus cost of inaction, this report used the concept of valuation, and they valued some of the impacts of climate change. And in response to this, 2007, a new study came, which was called the Economics of Ecosystems and Biodiversity. We have mentioned and discussed in different breakout groups about this. And this was especially designed to organize the thinking that how valuation can be used in a better way, credible way, to deal with the issues of ecosystem management and biodiversity. That was, the report came in 2010, October again. We all know that valuation helps. It helps because it can capture some of the out-of-market benefits. It can help in resolving various types of trade-offs over space, over time, over the stakeholders. It has the potential to clear the clouds of conflicting goals. and many things which is not so convincing to the public at large, economic valuation can do that. It helps in integrating the natural capital into the accounting system, what Glenn was talking the first day, and it strengthens decision-making tools in various ways. The list can be very long. This is not comprehensive. To cut the story short, valuation has utility. Now, one has to understand the context of valuation and the kind of reports, not the grey literature, but some of the published papers, the way they are appearing, probably they miss the point, many of them. The idea is not to capture, through economic values, the biodiversity and life on Earth. A very small subset of biodiversity is your ecosystem services. Further, a smaller subset is benefits for human appropriation, and a further small subset is economic values. And you will be surprised that the guy who influenced the thinking in economic science, Jonas Wicksell, in fact, he influenced both school of thought, Keynesian school of thought and Austrian school of thought in economic science. He had warned when he was trying to value some of the public goods in Sweden that valuing public goods will never be complete and comprehensive. You have to prioritize and understand and never claim that you are going to capture each and everything, especially in the domain of public goods. People sometimes forget that message. And in fact, I thought to highlight that part because that is probably one of the early thoughts of economic science which we still use in the context of valuation. Now, when we say ecosystem services and valuation, we have to understand that ecosystem service is a good concept, but if you want to do really valuation, you have to translate it in terms of vector of services produced by vector of inputs. You have to, if you want to follow the nomenclature, whether it is intermediate or final goods, considering that whether you are going to value a stock and flow will be really needed. Otherwise, you might land up doing all kind of wrong calculations. Again, sometimes valuing biodiversity or valuing ecosystem services or valuing both the net value or the gross value, there is a complete, I'm not saying all the studies are bad, but a large number of studies are not able to stand to the scientific scrutiny. And this is one, because this is from, which was also in a way used in one of the very influential assessment work in Britain, a national ecosystem assessment. You have to think that whether you are valuing a structure and process or final ecosystem services, goods or values, they all are different things. You have to also consider that if there is an oceanic wave and there is a scenic beauty, there is sometimes some element of input which you can't ignore. Without that labor or other types of input, there is no meaning of those ecosystem services and the benefits. So that part is sometimes missing. So that is the context of valuation. Now, there are problems, and there are some complexities in economic valuations. Any estimates, especially for ecosystem services and biodiversity, are bound to be imprecise. But they are imprecise because even if you follow that value of marginal product, two things you need to know. You need to know the price of the commodity in which the ecosystem services have been used, number one. And second, what is the marginal productivity of the system? I mean, you may not believe in that, but that could be one of plausible way to approach valuation. So you are bound to get a kind of imprecise values. So probably you might need to focus on the range of values in which the real economic value would lie. The old debate of marginal and total economic values, whether total economic values should be used or marginal economic values. Decision makers, typically, they would like to see that if they go one step ahead, what is the real cost and benefits of doing it? And in the context of ecosystem services, if one action is making impact on the flow of ecosystem services, that relationship should be clearly established. And then only that valuation should be credible and can be useful to the policymakers. Total economic values are excellent to create awareness. And people feel that, okay, they are important. But things in nature, they are important, we all know. We don't need, an economist to go and put dollar and pound value on them. The other thing which we have to think while discussing and analyzing the complexities in valuation is that values afforded by ecosystems are typically state, context, and place specific. For example, flood control benefits coming from the forest or different types of land use, they are more valuable, they service, the more valuable are the properties in danger of flooding. If the properties which are going to be damaged has not high value, this ecosystem services which is regulating will not have very high value. Second, pollution retention and neutralization are only valuable when they are pollutants to be retained and neutralized. The example could be very long list. Similarly, pollination and pest control services provided by areas of natural habitats are most valuable when such areas divert expanses of intensive agriculture. This is something which has been estimated by David Simpson for EPA. One more layer of complexities in economic valuation. Of course, many of the changes are nonlinear. So when you have different types of drivers, direct and indirect drivers, the change will be nonlinear. Sometimes two drivers, if one driver is making impact of 3, another of 2, it can't be 5, it could be much more than that. That is also true that you have synergy and trade-off amongst various ecosystem services. So doing valuation, one has to recognize and understand that. One more layer of complexities. See, you have on the y-axis, you have increasing system complexities in terms of scale, number of actors. On the x-axis, you have value plurality, which moves from provisioning, which is on the origin, to the regulating, to the cultural and ethical values. Economic values can be on the lower part. It probably cannot capture all the benefits which will be derived through plurality of values. And that's why if you, as you move from green, which is really you can capture, to demonstration, to recognition. I mean, so whoever is doing the value should not have this exalted view that they have been able to capture everything. No. And the moment you are in this between the green and red area, you are in really trouble because it is very hard to capture some of them. Now, on the one hand, you have these complexities. On the other hand, there is a great need for economic valuation. And they are also misused. I mean, the one layer is creating awareness. I have picked a few lines. By design, I have not mentioned the source, but they are from popular, respectable newspapers and reports. First, people saying, although the societal benefits of native ecosystems are clearly immense, they remain largely unquantified for all but a few services. If they are largely unquantified, how come the value is immense? Number one. Then, you have plenty of examples. For example, somebody saying in 2010, shore adjacent countries, those touched or encompassed by states, defined coastal zone, they had 6 trillion value, 44 million jobs. Somebody saying that one banyan tree in Bengal has more than $1 million US per month. That part I and this was also published. Estimated value provided by Australia's marine coast is $69.2 billion per year. They are fantastic estimates that creates awareness that, okay, nature is important for us. But who can, what kind of decisions can be made on the basis of this? Do you think people will be compelled to go and transfer some resources for conservation? Probably not. So that's why when we do valuation, where we try to assess the contribution in terms of financial sacrifices people would make for it, we have to be careful about two nuances. Number one, people don't express utility or even think in economically logical way. And that is true for larger parts of the world, especially in developing countries. People make a statement about their personal and collective values to define who they are through the causes they support. This has been probed and extensively written by Daniel Kahneman and others. Behavioral part, behavioral foundation of rationality on which the economic valuation is based should also be questioned and analyzed. These are the complexities, but what is the solution? And what basically I'm trying to say here, that number one, any economic valuation must have a purpose up front. What is the purpose? Are you doing it for PES? Are you doing it for cost-benefit analysis? Are we doing it for some kind of deliberation-based valuation? Are you doing it for integration of natural capital in the national accounts? That purpose should be clearly spelled up front. Second, the conjunctive benefits should be valued based on consumers' preference and demand and location. So it should be context and site and state specific. And the productive benefits should be valued by following the maintenance cost. We have seen lots of discussion in the breakout rooms about replacement cost or shadow project approach. Large number of studies are using replacement cost. Okay, so this is being damaged, suppose we have to buy it from the market. That also creates problem. This one should use provided the replacement cost approach should only be used if human engineered system provide the same quantity and quality of services. And human engineered system is the least cost option. And finally, aggregates of individuals would be willing to incur those costs. Only then you can use replacement. Otherwise, you might land up with the estimates which will be good, might make news in print and electronic media, might have some bites on TV, but then acceptance to the policymakers who are not unsmart people, they understand what is what, will be hard. Further, in terms of solution, valuation of ecosystem services has to be context specific, we have talked. Another thing is that more and more focus should be on the valuation of marginal change rather than the value of total. I think total is good as the first step for valuation, for raising awareness. Uncertainty in valuation is the key challenge. So you might like to consider the range and other kind of analysis. And of course, especially in temporal scale should also be considered. While discussing valuation, few things we should not forget. That what are the value articulating institutions which are revealing the values? Market is one, but market is not always the only one. And we have to think about the social milieu in which the value is being perceived and constructed and articulated, and through what vehicle. So value articulating institution, they have a very important role in terms of when you go for valuation of ecosystem services. Of course, valuation of ecosystem services cannot be done unless, this is based on the large number of data sets which we collected and we keep gathering for the United Nations, unless you have a methodological pluralism where you are, besides economics and ecology, behavioral sciences, sociology, anthropology, their integration is important. Otherwise, you might land up doing very mechanical and reductionist estimates. So interdisciplinary collaboration is really needed. And I'm happy Steve mentioned about the behavioral side and behavioral aspects, because individuals' identification with nature, they change capriciously, and they are capriciously changing preference, dynamic learning, ecological identity. They are some of the very important concepts while doing economic valuation. How a person identifies with the nature is different in different contexts. Discourse-based valuation should also be considered as one of the alternate options. And one thing we see, when we do valuation, we always, our lens is positional goods. Positional goods that in society, there are goods which are scarce and we can buy them to grow our position and status. But there are relational goods. Relational goods that a certain type of ecosystem services can be enjoyed in the group, and it has much better value. And it is not like a TV set or phone or computer, but it has a different character. And in fact, although in economics, there is a good literature on this, that while doing valuation, a joint appraisal of positional and relational goods is really needed. Still, people still, there are some studies showing it, but we need to do a lot more on that. And probably that will make the valuation more credible and acceptable in the society. I mentioned about one more thing I will mention now, which is transdisciplinarity. In valuation of ecosystem services, like we have disciplinary tradition, economics, ecology, somebody coming out with concept of emerging from Odom, and they said, we don't need economics. Embodied energy is a good measurement. That is fine. On the other extreme, you have marginal kind of valuation, and based on production function approach, input, output. They say, oh, just once you tell me the initial conditions of ecosystems and their health and resilience and how ecosystem flow, we can calculate the value in terms of economics. That is, then there has been multidisciplinary approach, interdisciplinary approach. In multidisciplinary, you bring different disciplines and make the methodology of each discipline porous enough to mix with each other. And then you have the third type, which is transdisciplinary. Transdisciplinary, there is no standard definition of transdisciplinary. I mean, whatever dictionary I could look, there was no standard definition. But the transdisciplinary basically emphasizes learning from each discipline. For example, you have knowledge hierarchy. This I have taken from Max Neff, which was published in 2005. You have empirical level of discipline, which is physics, chemistry, geology, soil science, so on and so forth. So what is existing on the ground is basically empirical. Pragmatic, that what it should be like. So you have fisheries, water management, agriculture, forestry, commerce, industry. Normative, what it ought to be. And purposive, the social conscience says that, look, values, ethics have a strong role to play, no matter whatever empirical evidences are saying. For example, if you are talking about forestry management, then you have to, of course, go for ecological sciences, but also you have to consider the commerce and industry. Now, all these arrows, what they are showing, that the learning should not be in one direction, but pragmatic level knowledge should be learning from empirical, because That is what is existing on the ground. And it should also learn from normative, which in turn should learn from purposive. Otherwise, the entire discipline can be bereft of ethics and conscience, which will be really, really bad for society, and especially for human well-being. So, learning from each other, feeding into each other, which is not very easy to do. I agree. At the doing a level, it is very tough. And valuation is very tough. In fact, I would like to conclude with this remark, which was given sadly by Lee Nordstrom some time back, that solution is not easy. The more social scientists preach the need for simple solution to complex problems, the more harm we can potentially cause in the world. And that means a lot of effort, learning, open-mindedness, and willingness to learn from each discipline, which looks like a very lofty goal, lofty ideas. But in terms of mundane valuation, it is very easy. But that is how a good valuation will happen. Otherwise, at the global level, you know, today 7 billion people, 200 countries, having different aspiration level. No, everybody, if you think that they will agree on valuation or ecosystem services, I mean, there are a large number of countries, forget about valuation, they even don't agree on ecosystem service concept. So, and some of their hunches and fears are not out of place. So, if we follow the transdisciplinary approach, we can make the valuation more credible and acceptable to the larger section of societies and countries. So, let us do it, but be careful that there are limitations, there are problems. Some of the problems I just try to highlight. I will stop.